Welcome back for a tutorial on loose watercolour with ink techniques for sunflowers. In this video you'll see the pigments mingle freely on the page as we capture the essence of our sunflowers, but without the need for every detail. Explore how to use dip pen and ink to bring those radiant blooms to life with spontaneous and expressive line work. I'm Omar, I'm an artist, illustrator and author, and I help artists improve their skills by sharing my knowledge from filling 40 sketchbooks. So these are some of the sunflowers that I bought yesterday. They're actually part of a 7-day challenge that I'm doing with Claire Gray, and one of the prompts during the 7 days is sunflowers, so I thought I'd get ready and start painting. My idea is to put several sunflowers across the page, all at different lengths across the double page. So this is my Hahnemuhle watercolour sketchbook. It's 100% cotton, and I'm reserving this sketchbook just for this technique of loose watercolour with ink. The pieces at the front are on a foodie theme with fruit and vegetables, so the next double page spread are for my sunflowers. I always do a warm-up. It's very tempting to go straight into a piece straight away and you just want to get on with it, but I'm going to be using this smooth cartridge paper, bog standard art paper in the UK. It's very inexpensive, and I'm just going to practice some strokes. And some people say, oh, isn't it a waste of pigment, or isn't it a waste of time? Like, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds just doing strokes like this, because I know this is the type of stuff that I'm going to be needing when I do the petals. So it just sort of loosens up my head and it loosens up my wrists. Before I forget, the brush that I'm using is the Winsor & Newton Synthetic Squirrel. It's their quill, and it says medium on here, although it is very large. And I'm just going to do a few more with the greens. You cannot underestimate how important things like this are before you embark on a much more elaborate piece. This is the angle that I'm going to try and paint this sunflower at, with the stem going downwards like that. First of all, let's mix up a little bit of the brown, and we're just going to put a few different versions in here as well, and maybe some people don't want to be going into this gutter area, but I personally don't have an issue with it. Because I'm going to be adding ink to this, I'm not going to be too concerned about making it a perfect round, because I can add details, whoopsie, using my dip pen in a little bit. First of all, let's start off with just a sort of a lemon yellow base, and that it's not perfect, and I am going to be adding some oranges in a little bit. Let's mix up a bit of orange now, a tiny bit of ochre with that, and you can see how some of the pigments are already running in from the middle. I'm just going to go across like this, and I am working quite quickly. I'm going to drop in a little bit more pigments in amongst that yellow, so that it harmonises a little bit more, and I love it when it going into the middle like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because I am going to be adding that line work. I think I'm going to add a little bit more sort of a quin gold as well, just to boost it in a few areas and give a tiny bit more contrast. I'm actually painting this during quite a warm day in the UK, so I'm going to be painting pretty fast. Let's get as I was saying, I do have to work pretty fast because I'm in a very warm room, and I want the pigments to mingle, and in order to do that I have to make sure the washes don't dry. If you've watched some of my other YouTube videos, you'll know that I use a quill brush just because it can carry so much pigment, and that enhances the way that the pigments mix, because there's so much pigment on the page they can't help but merge together. I need a little bit more of a brown happening. If you're enjoying this video, then please consider leaving me a thumbs up, a comment, and also subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in this technique, I also have a 3-hour Skillshare class, and there are 3 demos with a bonus video at the end where I talk a lot more about loose watercolour with ink. Furthermore, I do have a book called Go With The Flow Painting. There are lots more floral projects, but also a chapter on food and animals and transport. I'm going to quickly fill in the rest of this page here. 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2. I might only do 2 because I like odd numbers. Oh, I'm wondering if you can hear that squeaking upstairs. It's my kids. It's the summer holidays. 1 there and here. Okay, let's wash that brush thoroughly. Add the petals really quickly. I love creating these sort of movements. It's so expressive, so free. And sunflowers are great. They're such a basic sort of flower. You can't go wrong. You literally can't go wrong. That's why I wanted to show you this demo. Just added a bit more red and brown onto the brush. Probably a little bit too much red, but it's merging in with that brown, which is really nice. And just 1 more here, I think. And let's do this one really quickly. The room is really warm. I've had to close the windows so you can't hear the traffic, although you can still hear the kids. Now, you know what? I think this one, there is a little bit too much red. I'm just going to get some of that red off and replace it with some yellow. And what I'm going to do next, I think this one in particular is a bit more yellow, maybe at the tips there. I need to add the stalks. Let's go back to this one here. I'm going to mix up some of this lemon yellow with the olive green just to create kind of a very light green wash. I do want to include some of the leaves sort of poking out like so. Stalks are not completely straight. Again, I am mindful that this is drying incredibly fast, so I want to start dropping in some darker greens in there, maybe some of the olive green, but what you can do is add greater pigment. I don't have any leaves on this stalk, but I'm just going to add them. Let's continue with that pretty quickly here. I think that one needs a little bit more yellow. And also some of the leaves are much bigger. There's these little bits where they've obviously peeled off the leaves, and I'd like to pretend that there is some there. So I'm going to add some back here. And let's drop in some more pigment, some of that olive green. You'll notice that I'm just dropping in this green. I'm not even trying to create any sort of leaf shapes, and I will be able to add more definition once I start outlining parts of these in the brown ink. You know, if I thought about it, I could have done a few of these sunflowers as a side view, but you'd still recognise them as sunflowers, so I'm not going to beat myself up about that. Another time, you know. I'm free to choose when I next paint sunflowers. Let's say that the leaf goes like that. Oh, I love that pigment mixing up in there. Let's carry on with this one. I got a bit carried away. The nature of watercolour makes it quite hard to control, so instead of fighting it, I would love to teach you how to embrace those little happy accidents and let go of the final outcomes. So we're actually required to trust this whole art making process, including the fear of making mistakes, and see whatever the results we achieve as a chance to learn. Working loose feels quite exploratory and sometimes experimental, so it boosts our natural curiosity to keep exploring and expanding our creativity. From my own experience as a self-taught watercolourist, my sketches have become a lot more looser after I gained confidence in painting this way. Okay, we have to let this dry now. So this is the first half in a two-part process. Loose painting may be described as freer, where the essentials are included to visually communicate and provide just enough information for a recognisable piece. The nib that I'm going to use is called the Blue Pumpkin by Browser, and it's my favourite. It's so multi-purpose. Now it's time to add the ink details. I'm going to choose between Winsor & Newton or the Liquitex acrylic ink. I think today I'm going to use the burnt umber. So first of all, I'm probably going to add a little bit of detail to brown interior here. Luckily the paint dried really quickly, and if I'm looking closely, sort of halfway in, there's this lovely kind of spiral geometric thing happening, and I'm just going to give it a go, see how that looks. And it gets darker towards the edges. That looks quite nice. I'm not going to go around the whole thing, because I often tell my students on Skillshare that the brain is actually really clever, and it makes assumptions, probably has enough information to work out, hey, this is the sunflower, I recognise this. So you don't have to add everything, and I'm not going to outline every single petal. What I tend to do is go for contrast. I seek out the areas where it's the darkest contrast and I add those. I think working like this is like a crazy trust exercise, where you must trust that the viewer understands that what you have painted is a sunflower. It's difficult if you've not been used to working like this. I think this way of working can be introduced slowly, as we have to break certain habits in order to trust the materials and our capabilities. And the underside of this leaf is more in shadow. That's why I'm only going to add one line here, and the suggestion of some of this veining. And under here it's really dark as well, on this side away from the light. And you can see here that I've actually gone over the edge of that leaf, where I'm not outlining the watercolour section. If I look closely at the flower, these look like little spikes that are very dark against the petals. Just going to add a few more here on this side. The more I observe, the more I understand how this sunflower is constructed. And it's in between the petals that there is the darkest areas, and obviously some of the petals cast a shadow on the ones behind it. Oh, I just keep saying this, but I know it would be so tempting to outline every single petal. And some people do that, some artists do that, but my intention is to keep it super loose. Oh, I like that. I like the way that the ink has gone over that watercolour. For me, one of the many joys of watercolour is how expressive it can be. I really adore watching the flow of pigments and all the magical textures that can be created as it dries. And if you know my work well, I often encourage some of these effects to take place. Embracing those happy accidents is like playtime for me. Working fast but intentionally also helps avoid the feeling that you need to add too many details. If you imagine that you don't have time, it will help you to focus on the main elements. And painting quickly also means that you'll stop sooner, as often paintings get ruined because you don't know when to stop. Sometimes it's worth giving yourself a time limit for each new painting. I do have a video about time studies in your sketchbook, because they will improve your art, and discover how they can enhance your skills in observation, decision making, and reduce perfectionism. The link is in the description below. This area here, where the petals are blending into the sunflower that is next to it, I could make a decision as to which sunflower is in front. or which is behind, or I might just leave it like that because I really love seeing the pigments merging together like that. Although the watercolour takes up the vast majority of the page, it does rely on input from this ink line. So imagine if you took away the entire watercolour layer, what you're left with wouldn't really make sense, as the ink can't tell the story on its own. But if you didn't fill in with the ink, there's a sense that it's not complete. For me, this watercolour and ink combination is like a partnership. So that's why the watercolour layer can be a lot more underworked than what you may be used to. I have found this two-step approach alleviates some of that overworking that I sometimes encounter. I think working like this really takes the pressure off trying to create something that is realistic. I'm not really a massive fan of details. I can do details. I went to art school where we were taught how to draw highly realistically, and it's like a case of breaking it down. Once you know sort of some of the fundamentals, you're in a position to pick and choose what you want to create, how you want to create it, and this is my choice at the moment. This might be quite new for you. I've just realised I started outlining a bit too much. I want to keep it more like here. So I think what I'm going to do is concentrate on this area here. Just getting an indication that there's, a big collection of petals happening there. It's a very organic process where I gauge the amount of ink that might be needed from one piece to the next. You can see that all these sunflowers have different amounts of ink on them. The line is also about the density and the weight to communicate areas of light and shadow. There's actually, I've just noticed there's a bit of space here, and even though I haven't used any green to sort of indicate that there's leaves there, I'm just going to add one because I just want to fill up a bit of space, and I think that looks really nice actually. This sort of assessment comes towards the end of finishing a piece, where I look to see if there's any negative space where I can make the piece a bit more balanced. I don't know if you saw the oranges that I did in workshop week. Well, that's the same technique, and again it's what I've been writing in Go With The Flow painting. Which you can find on Amazon. Also, let me know if you enjoy watching this technique and if you'd like me to tackle a few other subject matter. I don't know, maybe some landscapes or buildings, fruit. Let me know what you'd enjoy seeing using this loose watercolour and ink technique. When beginners start, the ink lines can be awkward with little character or liveliness to them, so it's a good idea to get to know your dip pen and your particular nib so that you can vary the pressure and apply different types of strokes. You do need to vary your line width if you want something that's a little bit more energetic. I think sketching with ink will give you a lot more confidence and also patience because it's almost permanent. Every ink mark requires a lot of thought and intention, almost like mindfulness within the creative process. Unlike a graphite pencil, ink can't be easily erased, so mistakes can be seen as opportunities to adapt or incorporate creatively, furthermore boosting your problem-solving skills. Ink sketching requires adaptability by encouraging the artist to embrace those unexpected elements and adjust their work accordingly, so further nurturing that resourcefulness we all have as artists. As we evolve, we learn to navigate all the challenges and insecurities and triumphs, and all this process teaches us the value of every mark that we make, to find beauty in the unplanned and to embrace this journey that we are all on together rather than focusing solely on the destination. In a world where perfection is often the goal, the medium of ink provides us an opportunity to see something that's a little uncertain. I'm really pleased with how these sunflowers turned out. The colours have really mingled and there's a lot of movement and energy, and I love seeing that line work enhance the watercolour and support that feeling of expressiveness. At the time of this recording, I just hit 10,000 subscribers, but I'm still quite a small channel, so all the likes and comments really help my channel to be found with others so that I can share my gifts and talents even more. I do have several other videos on producing loose florals like this. I'll link them in the description below. Until next time, stay amazing.